Hiya, pals! Welcome to the Mouse Bytes podcast! Here we go!
Hello and welcome to Mouse Bytes, the show all about Disney video games, past and present. This is episode 23. I'm your host, Clay, and I'm joined by my co-host, Jeph. Hello, Jeph.
Why, hello.
Can you hear how low my voice goes?
It's so spooky.
Oh my gosh, it's so spooky.
Now you're turning into a crypt keeper.
Oh. All right. Well, we have children listening. We better.
Yeah, we don't want to scare them.
It's getting really scary even for me. So.
Yeah.
Well, how are you, Jeph?
Oh, I am spooktacular. How about yourself?
Good. Happy, just slightly early Halloween to you, sir.
Cheers, and to you as well.
Yes, and all the listeners, happy Halloween. Yeah, it's gonna be a good episode. We purposely sat down and came up with a nice spooky game to play, given the time of year. So it's gonna be good. And then next month we've got a great Thanksgiving game picked out just for the holiday. Jeph, go ahead and tell them what our Thanksgiving game is gonna be.
Oh, our Thanksgiving game is going to be something I haven't looked at yet.
Yeah, no, we don't have that picked out. I was just curious if you'd come up with something.
I'll keep working on that.
Everybody's favorite Disney movie video game, Turkey something.
Is there a Pocahontas game? Is that wrong?
There is. I've played it on the Game Boy, and it's terrible.
Oh, good.
And I'm not sure what she has to do with Thanksgiving, but...
Well, the first Thanksgiving was between the settlers and the natives, and there's a little bit of settlers and natives in that. Don't think it was the same group, because that was
John Smith. Was John Smith? Was he a pilgrim?
No.
I think he was. Yeah.
Oh,
pretty sure. That's
my bad. Yeah. Okay. Well, we can make him one.
Definitely. And on that note, I think we should go ahead and jump into this week's episode,
Yes.
guys. Today we are looking at Tim Burton's The Nightmare Before Christmas, The Pumpkin King. Awesome. So to start us off, Jeph, why don't you go ahead and tell the listeners at home if they've never played this game before, which moving forward, we're just going to call it the Pumpkin King, not the entire, title, all the names included and everything. Jeph, why don't you tell the people what the heck this game is?
Alrighty. So the Pumpkin King, at its core, is a Metroidvania style game, which, if you're not familiar with the term, you should be. No, I'm just kidding. It's essentially an adventure platformer where you upgrade your character to gain access to new areas of one giant overworld map. So it was developed by Toes, mostly known for developing Nintendo's Game & Watch Gallery series, some various Dragon Ball games, and some other Nintendo products, as well as far as we found, they ported Breath of the Wild to the Switch, which is pretty impressive. So,
yeah.
Good pedigree with this team, it looks like. It was released in Japan in September of 2005, and then just a month later in October in North America, and then a month after that, after Halloween, but before Christmas, in the European Union, November 10th. So it came out on the Game Boy Advance, so it's a 2D, 16-bit looking game.
Yeah.
And that's pretty much it for the production of it. I'm sure there's a few things you wanted to share, though.
Yeah, before I do that, I just want to point out it's nice that they were able to get this out in that window, because the great thing about Nightmare Before Christmas is you can literally watch it anywhere from like October through, the end of December. It works great as a Halloween movie and a Christmas movie. So the fact that they were able to get this out, starting in September all the way through to November, like they nailed it. They got it in. So Anyway, no, a couple things I wanted to mention. I guess you could maybe say it was just additional notes, but I do have a copy of this game, complete in box, and so I thought it would be cool just to point out a couple things. The box art on the front of the box is one of those, like, I don't even know what you call it, holographic ones where you like if you turn it
vertical slitted,
right, and it like makes like the little like DJ sound, like
yep.
And so it has like, if you turn the box, you get, Jack Skellington, but then if you turn it, he turns into the Pumpkin King. And so, I don't know, I thought that was really neat. I saw this in a store for like $15 and I was like, I have to get that. And so, and then, a couple months later, we're like, hey, we should review it. And so now I have it. The other thing that it came with I thought was really interesting is there's an insert in the game. It's basically just a piece of paper that is folded up. But when you open it up, it says, create your very own Halloween toy.
What?
It's like a cutout thing, basically. It says what you'll need is scissors, a glue stick, glue, or tape. And basically you like cut this thing up and you fold and you insert these little things. And it basically makes, it's hard to explain, but it's basically on the outside, it's like Jack Skellington's face, but then you open it up and there's like a little Halloween town inside with like different characters and stuff.
That's pretty cool.
It's a little elaborate. The character models look exactly like they were pulled from Kingdom Hearts almost.
Interesting.
It's like the character models from that, it looks like. Or, I don't know, maybe it was art assets from this game. I don't know. But I thought that was kind of cool. It's really weird and hard to explain. But I didn't do it. I just have it sitting here in a full thing. But I thought it was kind of cool. So
yeah,
I wanted to share that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So moving forward. Jeph, how about we talk about our history with this game? Why don't you go first, please?
Okay, so I'm sad to say this is yet another one that I wasn't aware of until we brought it up for the show. I kind of missed the GBA era in general. I didn't ever own a GBA. My younger siblings had one in that time frame, but I never did, and I didn't really play theirs because it was around... It was close to when I went off to college. I mean, it had been out a couple years before that, but...
Right.
I played some GBA games on a DS. Either way, I wasn't aware of this one. I didn't play it, and I played it for the first time just as we prepped for this episode this month. So,
cool.
How about yourself?
I don't have a lot of experience with it either. I love Nightmare Before Christmas, and so I'm always on the lookout for things pertaining to that. But for some reason, this one always kind of flew under the radar for me. I wasn't really aware of it. I had a Game Boy Advance. But I didn't have a ton of games for it, and I don't think I like actively went shopping a lot for them.
Yeah.
Kind of similar to you, where I think I was getting a little bit older and it wasn't as appealing, which is kind of what I've discovered, the past year or two, is there are really a lot of good games and a lot of good looking games for this console that I'm just like completely not aware of. And so it's been kind of cool looking back and seeing some of these games, but yeah. Like I mentioned earlier, I came across a copy in the wild and it was like, oh, I got to pick this up. $15, totally. And so, even after getting it, didn't really play it until we decided to cover it on the show. And then I was like, yes, I love Nightmare. It's like close to, it's fall. I'm going to play this entire game. And then I started playing it and I realized really quickly that it's not a platformer with levels, but like you said earlier, a Metroidvania, and I was devastated or just kind of upset because as we'll find out as we talk through this, I'm not a big fan of Metroidvanias. There's very few ones that I really like, and I think it takes a lot to impress me when it comes to those kinds of games. And so I was kind of bummed out about this and unfortunately didn't end up playing as much of it due to that reason. But regardless, I still think it's a cool thing, and I think they did some really neat things with it. There's another Nightmare Before Christmas game for the Xbox, and I also own that. I played a bit more of that one. Still haven't beat that one either, but I don't know. I think I like that one better than this one. But regardless, I'm really excited to talk about this one, and we'll see. Maybe Jeph can help me see the bright sides of this game. But we shall see.
We shall see indeed.
All right. Well, we're going to go ahead and take a quick break. When we come back, we will jump straight into some gameplay discussion. right, so starting off our gameplay discussion is visuals. Then we'll be followed by some audio. We'll talk about what it sounds like, and then we'll hit some gameplay difficulty. We'll talk through, some levels, some story, some bosses, all that good stuff. So Jeph, kicking it right off, visually, what are your thoughts? How does this game look?
Well, I will go right off the bat and say that the visuals are the highlight of this game for myself, and I think just in general. They are very kind of cartoony, cel-shaded looking in this essence of 16-bit, but very fluently animated. Much more color usage, I think, than the movie, the source. Burton movies tend to be very much kind of look like they were pen sketches and focus on the darker tones. And I get, especially on the original Game Boy that didn't have the backlit screen, a lot of the visuals had to be bumped up. So if you play it on a DS or you play it through an emulator or a Game Boy player on a GameCube, however you play it, it's going to appear much more bright than it would have on an original Game Boy Advance. So that noted, it's still pretty vibrant considering it's not saying it looks like Viva Pinata or something like that, but it definitely has a little more pop to it than the movie does. That said, the character models look pretty good in my opinion. I think they're pretty accurate for the the stylistic look. Not to say that they're one-to-one exact representations of the movie, like the Mad Doctor in the wheelchair. Is it Finkelstein or something like that?
Yeah, Finkelstein.
Yeah. His is, it's a little more cartoony and caricaturized, but not straying far from the source, like it's not like an alternate art style. It's more of just a limited, sprite sizes are kind of hard on such a tiny screen. Other than that, I don't have a whole lot more to comment on. There's some good presentation with like giant Jack tapping the screen at certain points, or little victory animations at the end of levels, or even the main menu screen looks really good. There's some transparency effects, which look a lot better on an original screen than they do on an emulator because of how transparency works with flickering sprites on alternating refreshes and stuff like that. So it's there's a bunch of little trade-offs here and there with how you play it, whether it's on a TV screen or on an original Game Boy Advance. How about you? What was your takeaway for the visuals?
Yeah, for the most part I had really good things I thought about it. Visually I thought they actually did a much better job than I expected. The cutscenes look really cool. I was totally happy with those. I think they did some fun things with even the in-game cutscenes where they like blow up the text size a lot in the dialogue and to emphasize, big stressful things. I think the character sprites for the most part look really good. Jack has a little bit of a weird issue, and it's mostly because he's like a really strangely, like his body proportions are really weird. And so he's got these super skinny legs and arms, and so I think to make him not like a single pixel thin, they had to kind of give him like a blue hue behind him. And so it looks a little weird, but I understand why they had to do it, because otherwise he just doesn't, I don't know, he just
he'd get lost really pretty easily.
Right. And so you gotta kind of have to outline him a little bit, and so so there's that. I think a lot of the level designs, backdrops and everything are really cool. I mean, the first level, like the background is yellow, but then the sun is like a giant pumpkin with a jack-o'-lantern face to it. So there's really cool things like that where maybe each level doesn't necessarily fit aesthetically, but then later on as you move through a little bit, I notice it gets a little bit darker and feels a little more, because at some points it's a little too bright, I feel like. But there's some levels where there's like little skeleton guys hanging from the trees behind you and like moving, so there's a nice good amount of depth to it where I feel like compared to like a Game Boy game, they're able to do a lot more with it, which I appreciated. And so most of the time, I think the art style, at least like the backgrounds and the floors, it felt very Burton-esque, where there was lots of like squigglies and lines and things. And so I felt like it was really true to the source material, in that aspect or whatever. There's another game mode that we'll talk about later. That's kind of an alternate thing, different from the rest of the game, and I thought that was very visually impressive. I won't give away what that is just yet, and so I thought that was really cool too, and kind of not what you would expect. And I don't even know if this is a visual thing, but the only thing I didn't like about, well, one of the things I didn't like about this game is the enemies, and I think a lot of it is just maybe the subject matter and not so much the art style. But basically the main bad guys of this game are bugs, and
Right.
it's just kind of lackluster compared to, like, I don't know, Nightmare Before Christmas has all these really cool character designs, and it's hard to come up with a bad guy when Halloween Town is pretty much full of bad guys, more or less, or the spooky guys, I guess. But I don't know. Bugs, I get that it ties in with Oogie Boogie and stuff, but it just, I don't know. It just didn't do it for me. And the designs they came up with just really didn't sell me on it. So maybe if they'd gone a different route with the style of the designs of the bugs, maybe I would have liked it more. But off the top of my head, that's probably my biggest negative visually. But I agree. I think it's by far one of the stronger points of this game are the visuals. So anything else visually you want to say before we move on? I just want to make sure I give you a chance.
No, I think we pretty much summed it up. Just commenting on the point you made about the enemy type is, it's, if you break down the movie, and so this is a prequel, we'll get into that a little bit later, but even so, like, the universe doesn't really have any antagonists other than Oogie. It's like most of the conflict is Jack versus himself. So
right.
That does make it hard to come up with something, and you don't want to violate the existing universe by creating some sort of fake antagonist or whatever. So I get it. That's a tough choice to come up with anything outside of Oogie Boogie, and so to come up with the bugs, I get it. It's a trade-off, but it is unfortunate because there's not a whole lot of enemy variety.
Also, there's a couple other things I forgot. Just some small things. When you sit in an electric chair to get full health, it does like this shocking animation thing, and I just thought that was actually really cool. And then when you beat bosses, there's a kind of like a, I don't even know what you call it, I guess like a win
mini
animation.
Cutscene. Yeah, like Super Smash Brothers victory cutscene.
Yeah, and it has some music from the movie, and then he kind of does his little like I did it motion, and I don't know, I just thought that was really well done part two. And when I saw that, it kind of, the first time, it kind of made me smile because I was like, oh, that's actually really cool.
Yeah.
And really well done. So I liked that. But there's a lot of little things like that in this game. There are some nice little details and stuff, and I think that they definitely paid attention to details. Certain levels, you're walking past pumpkins, and they're jack-o'-lanterns, and they're glowing on the inside and stuff, and
fireplaces, and
there's some cool lighting effects.
Yeah, absolutely agree.
Audio wise, the only thing I liked that they did use some of the music from the movie. I realized when I was playing this game that obviously Nightmare Before Christmas is a really special thing, the original movie and all that, and I think one of the reasons it works so well is because of the soundtrack, and so using some of that, even not just relying solely on it, I think was a good call on this one. Once you hit the first level, though, all of a sudden you're like, ooh, I wish that would come back a little bit.
Yeah.
Did you experience that?
Exactly that. Yeah, I love that it had it on the title screen, and was a little sad that it wasn't for the rest of the game, especially because it's a musical. It's based on a musical.
Right.
Not unlike many of our other Disney games that we cover, but kind of the same problem we run into with the Capcom games, where sometimes they'll sample it on the title screen and give you a tease, and then it will kind of just, switch into the original compositions.
Right. And so I don't know if it was level 1 or level 2, but it was kind of getting annoying to me at one point. But then I think about the time that I was like, all right, I'm kind of sick of this. I think I finally kind of moved on to the next part, and the music changed up, and I was like, okay, that's good. I can breathe a little bit. But for a minute there, I was like, I don't know about this.
Yep.
And then I think it got a little bit better. So I don't know. I don't know if level 1 was their best hit or whatever. But
yeah.
But every now and then the Danny Elfman stuff would come back,
Mm-hmm.
and like the winning animation screen that I was telling you about when you beat a level, like that comes back, and I appreciated that. Like, oh, good, there's a little reference here and there,
Right.
and so I liked that. I thought that was good that they, I understand they didn't use the original score for the whole game, but they tried to use it when they could. So, props to them. Audio-wise, anything else you can think of?
Yeah, I mean, the sound design in general is... So again, I didn't play a whole lot of Game Boy Advance games, so I'm not sure if this was super common or if this was that they spent their audio resources maybe on the music and the MIDI files. I'm not sure what it is, but a lot of the sound effects are like 8-bit waveform and square wave and stuff like that. Saw wave and square wave, like stuff you would hear on the NES. And then there's this really annoying sound every time you pick up a fish skeleton, which is that the health or the ammo?
Yeah.
But it sounds like to me, it just instantly makes me think of one of the cuckoo clocks in Pinocchio, like in the movie. And I'm not sure it's really that, but it's kind of like this, whoa, whoa, and it's just awful because it's so common.
I wasn't sure what they were going for on that.
I don't either. And it's we comment on this a lot where they just abuse sound effects for constant items or things where it's like, you know what, this needs to either be subtle or non-existent because it's obnoxious. Another one that I didn't play with my wife around, but I guarantee you she would have not been happy about that. So
yeah, I'm listening to her right now. It's like wah, wah,
mm-hmm.
wah, wah. And you're like, what? You're picking up like fish bones.
Mm-hmm.
Why would the fish bones go wah, wah?
Yeah.
It seems
even half of that, either the first half were just like whoop, or the last half like whoop.
Yeah,
like I don't know, you could have cut it in half. You probably could have done much better than that. Even it just is excessive and annoying. Drove me crazy. So
I agree.
But yes, a lot of the sound effects, like as you jump or pull yourself onto things, are just very 8-bit.
Thankfully, it's the sound effects though, not the music, right?
Right. Yeah, and that's a good point because the sound effects are the music is at least MIDI sampled, not unlike the later generation, like the Donkey Kong Country generation of Super Nintendo in that vein, rather than like the Super Mario World earlier ones that were still kind of, I mean, that's a great soundtrack, but the instrumentation of it is pretty basic, using basically what came stock, I think, with the sound chip on the Super Nintendo. I'm not super familiar with the hardware of the Game Boy Advance. It's kind of one of my blind spots with Nintendo systems. I know it had 2 different processors, and I'd imagine there was different sound hardware, and I'd heard stuff about like when they ported Donkey Kong Country to the Game Boy Advance that they ran into issues with the audio because it was not as good as the Super Nintendo, which again was like 10 plus years older. It was like 11 years older than the Game Boy Advance, but mobile.
Right.
So anyway, there was limitations in place, and frankly the sound design of the game is maybe one of the weaker points outside of what we'll talk about with the gameplay.
Right. Speaking of the gameplay, we can go ahead and hit on that. Yes, so as Jeph mentioned earlier, and me as well, this is a Metroidvania style game, so it is not your typical linear level 1 go left to right and level 2 go left to right. This is a one of those where you explore, you make your way through areas, you find new areas that you can't get to until you acquire, items or weapons or upgrades to access those areas. And so it works, in that way. Which, I mean, if you're into that, that's great. I know a lot of people love Metroid games, and I don't know. I struggle. It frustrates me a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't know. We can talk about it, but basically you go to like a boss, you fight the boss. Once you beat the boss, they give you an upgrade, and then you kind of backtrack through the game that you've already played through to get to areas that you weren't able to access earlier. And so depending on how good the game is, it helps paint a picture of where you need to go, and helps you understand that you can't reach certain areas. There was a couple points in this game where I thought I could reach something and I couldn't. And it took me, an agonizing amount of time to finally realize it. And so that got a little frustrating, but There's also there's a lot of collectibles and things that you can collect in this game, different weapons that you use as Jack Skellington, and so he doesn't just rely on normal attacks, but he is, using different weapons. I'm just trying to think overview broadwise. Obviously there's a ton of enemies you have to fight, and you make your way through, and then there's different save points as you work your way through.
One thing about the save design of the game is that it's kind of unfortunate for a mobile game. Like, just playing it through, it's fine because it's very similar to the old Metroid games where you find a save station. This one, it's a scarecrow. But like, for a Game Boy game that you have to go track those down and go return to them, there's no like quick save and resume later.
Right.
A little bit of a flaw there with mobile, and this is still in the earlier-ish days of good mobile design. Personally, don't feel like that really came into its own until late DS and now on the Switch, where you can kind of just do save states and save at any point, because I feel like that's really important for Game Boy and mobile type games.
Yeah, and I totally agree with you. I also think that it is nice in this instance where you can literally just shut the game off and turn it back on if you die or lose too much health, and you're like, I'd rather just start at the save spot, and rather than worrying about it auto saving after you already lost, say, 2 or 3, health things or whatever. So I can see both sides of it, but I agree. It's not great for a pick up and play for 5 minutes, because you're probably not going to make enough progress to warrant, or to even find a new save point at that point. So you'd have to backtrack back to the save, and save. And unfortunately, after you kill enemies and then leave, when you come back, there's going to be new enemies there. So that doesn't really, I don't know, help you too much. So, Jeph, real quick, would you mind going through the weapons that this game has?
Yeah, so the first one you get, and kind of your main one, is the frog gun. It's kind of like when Sally gets the frog's breath into the stew in the movie. It squeezes it and shoots out its breath. Basically, they turn that into the main weapon, and so you use it and it shoots out a puff of green smoke, and that kills most enemies. And then you can get an upgrade later by Dr. Finkelstein. So later you get the bat boomerang. It basically sends out a burst of bats. I didn't even get late enough in the game to use any of the later weapons. I just kind of had the frog gun. But the next one is the pumpkin bomb, which is a grenade shaped like a pumpkin, powered up later on in the game by the clown. Probably, I would guess, a bigger blast radius or multiple. I'm not sure. I guess that's it for weapons.
Yeah, not a ton. I like the theme of them. Like, I think that, like you mentioned, they kind of feel like references to the movie, so I think that's cool. But obviously not a ton of variety. At least they didn't put any kind of like ammunition on these. Yeah. As far as I can remember, is you have an infinite amount of the things. I know the frog gun had a larger blast radius. I think it was actually even did more damage than the bat boomerang did. I think the bat boomerang, it goes further, but it's a little bit weaker, and so I feel like they kind of did that intentionally, obviously, so you would have to cycle through your weapons and use different things depending on, if you want to reach out and kill something, or if you want to get up real close to it and do more damage. And so I think they kind of tried to make them unique in their own way, which was cool. So following that, you also have different collectibles, things that you can find and pick up. The first one being the fish bones that we talked about earlier, which basically give you health. Then throughout the game you'll find these hidden shrunken heads that you can use that affect your health. Now this part is kind of confusing and a little bit interesting, because basically when you start the game, you have a health meter, and then you see a little shrunken head and a number 0 sitting right next to the head. So basically you start with 1 bar of health, and that's it. And so if you die, you game over, and you have to load up your game. And if you haven't saved yet, then you start over. So I thought it was weird. I'm like, why are they starting you with 0 health? I thought that was stupid. Come to find out, it's you don't even have lives, you just have bars of health. And so the number at the bottom actually represents how many bars of health you have. And so as you find these heads, you gain additional bars of health. So it's nice in the fact that if you go through that whole thing of health, you don't die and start the life over. It'll fully fill your bar again. But if you go through all those, then you die.
So that's a straight up Metroid ripoff.
Is that a Metroid thing?
Yeah. See, so my first ever Metroidvania, and really the only ones I've played, are the Prime series on GameCube and Wii. And that's exactly how the health system works. You start with kind of one tank, and then you kind of increase your tanks, and yeah.
Okay. Yeah, tanks.
It's the exact same thing.
Right. And so, I don't know. Another great example, or a prime example of of them just ripping, Metroid off, but whatever.
Yeah.
Anyway, also there is the electric chair, which I mentioned earlier, which fills your health back up. I assume that only fills up your current bar. I don't think it, gives you additional. And then the scarecrow, as Jeph mentioned, is the save point of the game. So, yeah, so you look out for those. There's also some additional, I think the pumpkin bombs, I think there's a finite, amount of ammo for those, and so you have to fill those back up. And then there's also little peppers or something for the pumpkin king,
basically fireball
upgrade
mode.
Yeah, where you fly around and you break through walls and fly, basically. So so that's one thing, is that there's that. There's also a part in the game where you eventually find your dog Zero, and then I only noticed it played it at the beginning of the game, but basically there's certain parts where you get to play as Zero, which is kind of cool. And so basically the game mode completely changed up at that point. And so at one point in the game, I was locked in Jack's house. I couldn't get out, and I was like, Zero, I need your help get out of the house. And so he basically like flies through the chimney. And so it changes the perspective completely. And I don't know, Jeph, maybe you know the lingo to explain what this is exactly.
It's like a pseudo 3D, somewhat mode 7 kind of like, looks like the 3D rendering of like F-Zero or Mario Kart, with sprite scaling to have the items that are coming at you. Essentially, you're going through a chamber, and it's presented in like over-the-shoulder pseudo 3D. In this one, it's up a chimney. In other ones, it's like through an underground tunnel, avoiding routes. But it's pretty much the same thing. Just avoid stuff, collect fish bones, I think, and then that's pretty much it.
Like keeps
like
your
a little
health
bonus mini game, but not really.
But but you still have to like get through to
to get to
continue.
Know area. Yeah,
right.
Exactly.
And so I noticed that the damage was a little harsh on that. Every now and then I would run into one and like lose a ton of health, but then the fishbone health was aplenty at certain points, so it wasn't too bad. But yeah, so that was the part I was talking about earlier. I just thought it was a nice change up. I wish there was some more of this stuff, and I don't know, maybe there is, because I didn't get all the way through, but yeah, I don't know. It's a little choppy, and probably, a kid who played it nowadays would be like, that's garbage, but yeah. I still think it's kind of cool for what it is. It's something different. It reminds me of those old computer screensavers where you like
the maze.
Right, the maze. That's kind of the vibe
similar.
I get.
Yeah, it's similar to like Doom and Wolfenstein, the very first ones. Like it's just that pseudo 3D but with 2D assets. Yeah.
Yeah, but so kind of cool. Then the other thing that this game offers is there are 3 mini games that you can play. So if you've been playing, your Metroidvania for long, and you're like, oh, I can't stand this anymore. This gameplay is so frustrating, and I hate backtracking and fighting bad guys I've killed a million times. You can take a break, and you can play some less than quality mini games, which you have to unlock. They aren't just available, but once you unlock them, they're on the main screen basically. But there's 3 of them. They're called Bonebreaker, Whackhammer, and Skullduggery. Now, Jeph, would you please be so kind as to explain to the listeners at home a little bit about these mini games?
Yeah, they're pretty basic. It looks like they can be played over link cable, and they kind of show like 4-player icons, so I think that they can be, but by default you play the CPU. So Bonebreaker is they're all very simplistic. So this one is it looks like an old torture device where you like kind of crank to squash stuff, but this one it's hit left and right as fast as you can to get your squasher to squash a skeleton to break the bones. Whackhammer, when we were talking about this in preparation, I kind of likened it to a mini game that's in the movie Wreck-It Ralph, when Vanellope's making her cars and he has to sort like ingredients, good ingredients from bad ingredients. This one's basically you have things scrolling across the bottom of the screen, and you've got 2 hammers, one with a bat, one with a mouse, and you just have to hit the corresponding button to the hammer in time with when the item crosses like the whack point, which is not the official term, but it's called whack hammer.
Whack point.
Yeah,
why not?
Coined that video game phrase right there. So yeah, basically just it's combination of timing and mostly it's recognition of the correct icon / item. And then the last one, the Skullduggery, is kind of a ball under a cup memory game. It's like little presents and remembering what's in what, and they switch around and you pick which one had the item in it. And so yeah, that's the 3 mini games. All right.
Yeah. One thing I forgot to mention, these can be played in single player or in multiplayer mode, which can be used by using the Game Boy Advance system link cable or whatever. Well, there we go. Nicely, you only need to have 1 copy of the game to do it, which I can appreciate.
Yep.
But yeah, these games are super lame, and even with friends would probably not be much fun. You should just go play Mario Party at that point.
It's true.
Yeah, so I don't know. It was cool they tried to come up with something, but it kind of felt more like an afterthought, or it seems like an afterthought, I guess. So not really anything to write home about. One other thing I wanted to mention, I started playing this game, and I guess maybe it came with the fact that I was still wrapping my head around the fact that it was a Metroidvania, but I played a lot of the game before I realized, I should probably look for my map, because this game has to have a map.
Yeah.
And so I finally hit select to bring it up, and that was when I was finally like, okay, thank goodness there's a map in this game.
Yeah.
Which any game like this really needs one. I don't know. I guess it's an okay map. I feel like it's relatively, it shows you where scarecrows and electric chairs are, and then it shows you where like doors are located. So it helps. You need it.
Very, very similar to a Metroid map. So yeah.
Okay. Other than that, I'm trying to think if there's anything else we're not hitting on. Gameplay wise, there's a couple special skills that you get later on in the game. One of them is gumshoes, where you can, if you see a red colored sticky wall, you can basically walk. You can walk on the walls and on the ceilings. There's a stretchy ghost where Jack can reach up to high places with the help of ghosts. Summon the ghost by hitting the call switch with a weapon, and basically you can jump on the ghosts. And then the last one is acid bath, which walk Jack into an acid bath and he will melt into a blob. It's a little morbid, but cool, I guess.
Works for him.
Jack will then be able to slip into tight places. Then you press up on the control pad to reform him back to normal. So, interesting.
The creative uses of him, and I feel like they work within the realm of the series and what's presented in the movie. Like he pulls off his head in one song, so I mean it's not that far-fetched to have him melt. So
totally. So that's, I guess, the gameplay in a nutshell. Difficulty-wise, it's hard to say. Just, I obviously I got to the point where I was like, I don't want to play this anymore. I got frustrated. I don't know. I think it's not necessarily, it wasn't that I was like the game was so difficult that I was frustrated with it. It was more just the monotony of backtracking and fighting the same bad guys and trying to keep your health up between save points. Looking at some of the later gameplay footage, it does seem to get more difficult. I don't know, Jeff, what did you think about the difficulty?
Yeah, in general, I was kind of in the same boat as you, where I got over it kind of quickly, but I think my biggest complaint is like when you're shooting, you're locked into the animation, and like while jumping, you can't do it. And I feel like if they just added a little more mobility while shooting and killing, it would have worked a little bit better. Why they didn't is beyond me, because other games in this genre tend to allow that and make it a little more fluid and a little more bearable. So it's a little annoying to me. It's like you can either jump and shoot at, you know, a point in your jump and that's it, or you can be on the ground and shoot. But like it sort of like locks you for that split second, and it just doesn't feel good from a gameplay perspective.
Yeah.
And then that kind of just ruins the rest of it for me, because it slows it down tremendously after enough, you know, enemies respawning and all that. And like if you go backtracking, I get that you don't want to keep them all dead, but maybe doing it timer based rather than screen based, if that makes sense, where,
Yeah.
you know, have them be dead for 5 minutes and then eventually they respawn, rather than if you go off screen and come back, they'll all be back, and that's super
Right.
annoying.
Totally. The few bosses that I did play, I felt were pretty fairly difficult. I don't know. I felt like the first boss wasn't too hard, and then the next one was, you know, a little bit more. And now thinking about it, it was actually kind of difficult because half the boss just took place off screen, and it was a little frustrating. But
Yeah.
I don't know. I think Jack controls well. I think that for the most part, he did everything that I would want him to do as far as like a platformer game would go. You know, you can grab onto
The ledge grab is
ledge
huge.
grab.
Yeah.
They
helps.
definitely designed the levels with that in mind, and so you
Mhm.
really got to have that. So I mean, everything works fine. Like it controls fine. I feel like all that, you know, you brought up a couple things. So really, there's nothing that the game I think does badly, poorly, as far as, you know, just the basics of the game. So moving on, the story, not too much to it. As Jeff mentioned, this is a prequel. Reading out of the manual here, it's actually pretty brief and short and sweet. In this video game prequel to Tim Burton's The Nightmare Before Christmas, a frustrated Oogie Boogie has failed to create a holiday of his own, so he tries to take over Halloween. Help Jack defeat Oogie Boogie's Vile. This is so weird. Plot and save Halloween Town from being overrun by bugs. Yeah, it's really weird. I feel like there should be a comma there, because it says help Jack defeat Oogie Boogie's Vile, period. Plot and save Halloween Town from being overrun by bugs. But I feel like it should be help Jack defeat Oogie Boogie's Vile, plot and save Halloween Town from being overrun by bugs.
Yeah, they're using it as a noun rather than a adjective.
Yeah.
So
sure.
like
Yeah,
a vial
word
of
vial.
blood, which is weird. I
Right.
don't really know what that reference is.
So maybe it's just not well, translated.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
or maybe it is. I don't know. Maybe I just don't know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah. So overall, it's. I mean, the story is pretty interwoven into this game compared to maybe some older games. You know, starting out, you run into the mayor and you talk to different characters throughout. Lock, Shock, and Barrel are, you know, they show up in and out throughout the game, and so there's good amounts of, you know, breaks where there's story elements involved. You rescue other characters, or you run across other characters from Halloween Town, and so I liked that. I thought that was neat that it wasn't just like level, you know, intro at the beginning and then, you know, an end scene or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
I did think the final cutscene at the end of the game is a little lackluster, but that's usually how it goes, I guess.
Yeah.
I feel like they get to the end of the game and they don't know what to do with it, and so they're like,
Yeah, it's probably related to storage space and stuff like that. Yeah.
right. And basically the mayor's like, Jack, we don't have time for you to talk to Sally. We need to get ready for Halloween. And then I guess that's them kind of setting up the movie. I don't know. So, but overall, the story, I guess, isn't terrible. I think it's cool that they at least did a prequel, or tried to call it, a prequel instead
Yeah.
of just being like, this is a random thing that happens at some point somewhere. So other than that, trying to think, there was something else I was going to mention about the gameplay, and now I can't remember what it was. There's numerous different bosses in this game. I'll list a couple of them here: Mega Spider, a giant snake, Roly Poly, a colossal moth, a zombie centipede, Lock, Shock, and Barrel, Oogie. Then you get Icky Oogie or Oogie Icky. I don't know. They're all pretty much bug themed, which I already kind of shared my thoughts on that.
Yeah. Yep.
But what are you gonna do? So, I'm trying to think if there was anything else to say that I mentioned. Jeph, did you have any other things before we move into our final thoughts?
No, I think at this point we've kind of covered the main gist of it, and I don't know if there's too much more that we could say without really just repeating what we've kind of said so far.
Do that. Yeah. Okay, let's go ahead and jump into our final thoughts. Jeph, would you please start us off?
Yeah, so, I mean, this game is oozing with visual presentation, and definitely you can tell the people who made it seem to be really big fans of the IP, and it shows in the look and feel of the presentation. It falls a little bit flat as far as the overall game, and it's weird because it's not like this game was rushed out to meet some sort of deadline or anything like that. It was, it's how long did it come out after the original movie? Like 12 years. And so it's not like it was tied to match the movie release date or anything like that, which often plagues licensed games. But it's kind of like a Metroidvania light in that it doesn't quite have the depth or innovation of a new entry in either Castlevania or Metroid or anything similar. And, it's cool to have the license tie-in and all that and the visuals, but it doesn't hold enough gameplay-wise or anything to really warrant a recommendation from me. So, like, it's pleasing. It's got some decent music tracks here and there, and then some not so decent ones. Overall, it's like it's a game that wants to be good, but it's just not quite good enough. I'm with you. I don't really love Metroidvania games that much. Like, the Prime series is my one exception to that, personally. So that's pretty much it. I would recommend, if you like the franchise, check it out if you have the ability to, the means to, but otherwise wouldn't say it's a must play.
Okay. Yeah, I guess my big thing with Metroidvania is they always feel super long, and I don't feel like, I don't know. I just don't feel like the changes up where they change things up, I don't feel like it's drastic enough, which is weird because I love platformers. So to say something like, I don't know, it's like I feel like it outstays its welcome.
I feel like it handles it depends how they handle the backtracking mechanism, because that's a core to it. You have one giant game world and sometimes you have to backtrack, and if those are handled well, it works, and if they aren't, it just drags it out.
Yeah, and it just doesn't feel like you're making a ton of progress, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I guess, so final thoughts. I went into this really excited, left a little bit frustrated. There's a couple points in the game where there's arrows pointing, go this way. And so I spend all this time going that way. And then I collect a shoe, which is, there's like different clothing from like Sally and different characters that you collect. They're like side items, which we didn't mention, but you spend all this time going through this really frustrating area just to grab a shoe, and then it's like for something later in the game that really doesn't even affect the main gameplay. I don't know, stuff like that frustrates me, and it was like at that point I just wanted to die and like not have to retrace my steps. And so I don't know, stuff like that was a little frustrating. I think if you're a fan of Tim Burton or Nightmare Before Christmas, I think you should definitely check this out. I feel like it's a relatively good if you're looking for something where you're like, oh, I want to spend more time in Nightmare Before Christmas world, like, yeah, you could totally pick this up and get some fun out of it that way.
Yeah.
So if you're a fan of the series or the movies and stuff, I would say definitely go for it.
Totally.
If you're a fan of Metroidvanias, then I would say definitely check this out.
At least check it out, yeah.
But yeah, other than that, I agree. Visually, it's a good looking game. Audibly, at times it works well, and then sometimes it doesn't. So yeah, unfortunately, I wasn't as thrilled. I was totally like ready to like put in lots of hours if I needed to beat the whole game, and then very quickly I realized like this was not made for me. And I try to not be completely biased just based on the fact that I'm not a fan of the genre. In fact, I've reviewed a lot of games outside of the show that are Metroidvanias, and so I don't know. I feel like I've played enough of them to know when they're at least half decent and when they're good. And so I don't know if this one really stacks up to the rest. I'm not a big Metroid guy, so it's hard for me to compare completely. But I have played Metroid games, and so I have a decent idea. But yeah. Unless you're really into the subject matter, I would say stay away. Unfortunately, I feel bad. I hate talking negatively about this game because I love Nightmare so much, but just not exactly what I was looking for. Maybe next year we'll check out the Xbox one and see what we think. Maybe that one will be better.
Yeah.
So, all right, guys. Well, that is it for this week's episode. We hope that you guys have a great Halloween. Hopefully you can watch some Nightmare and maybe some other Tim Burton, Disney Halloween movies. If you haven't already, check us out on Twitter. We are at mouse_bytes. We're on there. Every time we post a new episode, that's the first place we let people know that you can find our new episodes. You can also go to our website, thenintendovillage.com, where you can find a list of all of our episodes as well as some other great shows. They also do reviews for Switch games and some other cool stuff. So check that out. You can also go to our YouTube page where you can just search Nintendo Village, where we post basically gameplay. So you can see me crapping my way through Nightmare Before Christmas and playing terribly. But if you like to watch gameplay while you listen, you can definitely check that out. Guys, join us next week. We are playing and reviewing one of the pinnacle games to ever come out. One of the most notorious, most, in my opinion, one of my favorite video games that has to do with Disney, and that is Lion King.
Woo-hoo.
And I am so excited, and we got a lot to say about this game. I'm probably gonna have to figure out a way to play through this game because I am not talented enough to play through it without
I might need diesel level selector.
Yeah, so but I'm excited to talk about it. I have so much history with that game and so many good memories, so I'm super stoked to talk about it. So it'll be really good. Jeff, well, thanks so much for making this happen. Have a good Halloween, sir.
You as well, and don't forget, this is Halloween.
See you later.
Bye.
Thank you so much for watching. Be sure to subscribe, check out some of our other videos, and visit thenintendovillage.com, your home for everything Nintendo.